to Unraveled Game Thoughts. If my lighting is a little off today, it is dark outside and it's a little early. So sometimes getting these things going just has to be done early in the morning, but I've got my coffee and I think we can jump into this. Welcome to another edition of Unraveled Game Thoughts Top 100 Games for 2022. We are working on numbers 30 through 21 today. So again, the first several videos I did were in groups of 10, and this one, oh, I'm sorry, they were in groups of 20, and this one, now I'm backing it down to groups of 10 so I can spend a little more time talking. There we go. That is better. All right. So jumping right in with number 30 is Railways of the World. And I started playing this on Board Game Arena just to try it out. I was curious, and almost immediately I was like, I like this game. I was not good at it terribly in my first several games. In fact, I still don't do terribly good at it. You have to scroll around a lot on the screen, and I feel like I don't really like playing this one on Board Game Arena because the map is usually so big that if I try to take a turn on my phone, it's very tough. I'd rather take turns from my laptop, but even then it's still a lot of scrolling, and I just can't see the big picture very easily and where everybody's pieces are and what's going on all at once. And I'm really looking forward to the day that I can play this game in person with a physical copy of the game. So, but it seems like an interesting, meaty economic game. There are elements of Brass Birmingham I can kind of feel coming through with the way the income works to some degree. There's a lot to figuring out how this game works well and how to play competitively. I haven't grokked yet, but I would like to play it several more times. I enjoy it every time I play it, and yeah, it's a lot of fun mechanically speaking. And so this one's on my wish list, and yeah, any feedback folks have on Railways of the World, your experience with that, what maps you thought were best, shoot, tips and tricks. I'd take some of those. I think I have a habit in games like that, and I've done this in Brass Birmingham, where I might try to play a game like this and not have, what do you call it, negative income. So so in Railways of the World, there are cards you can play, and you got to use a whole turn to play a card, but there are cards you can play where you will gain income whenever anything is delivered to a particular place. And so the last time I played, I remember really eyeballing, okay, where are people most likely to deliver to? Can I get these cards on the table and start developing some income without having to actually take a loan? And if you spend money over your normal amount, you just end up taking a loan. Well, the way Railways works is those loans, you don't ever pay them off. They're just like, it's like if I have to take a loan of 6,000 lira or whatever it is for the particular version, then every time I gain income, 6,000 comes off the top. And then if I've, like, say my income was at 10,000, well, now I lose my 6 and then I get 4. And so there's like trying to kind of figure out the what is the best way to do that, you know, down the road. So yeah, there you go. There's some pieces of how the cubes are randomly placed on the board as far as which items can be delivered that I haven't fully mastered, and this is one of the reasons why I kind of want to be able to see the whole board right in front of me. Maybe in a couple months I'll get to play the physical copy and try it out. But that is Railways of the World at number 30. Number 29 is a pretty heavy game. I think I think most people would call this a very heavy game, and honestly I felt like it was super heavy. After having played it a couple times now, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's lost some of the weight it had initially, and maybe that's where most of the weight is just kind of the getting in the door and learning this game and figuring out how all the pieces fit together. Once you've learned it, it doesn't necessarily feel quite as complex as it seems at first. But that is the 2020 release of On Mars by Vital Lacerda and Ian O'Toole, and I'm sorry for Railways. That is by Glenn Drover and Martin Wallace. I forgot to point that out. Art for Railways was Kurt Miller, Paul Niemeyer, and David Oram. And so coming back over here to On Mars, Vital Lacerda and Ian O'Toole were the designer and the artist who did these, and or I should say, yeah, designer and artist. I like the theme of space exploration, and I like the idea of terraforming Mars. I mean, I like the game Terraforming Mars, and I've kind of been enamored by maybe even the game. I've heard, what is it called? No, it's not called On Mars. It's called Martians. First Martians. It doesn't get a ton of great reviews, and I've watched a few playthroughs and kind of like, I don't know, I can't tell. But On Mars is Vital Lacerda, so I kind of have some idea of what to expect as far as how mechanisms are going to interact with each other to a degree. There's a little bit of collaboration with this game where all players kind of are working together to build up the space station, or the Mars. It's not a space station, it's the life support system. I think it's called LMS, Life Management System, something like that. I forget what it stands for, but it's basically how this system and how well it's developed to help everybody on Mars survive. And you have to work with other players to push different aspects of that development up the board. And there's several end game triggers. It could be either there are usually three goals that are out on the board, and if 2 out of those 3 get completed, I think that triggers the end game. Or maybe it's all 3, or it's 2 out of 3 if another thing is it depends on how far the life support system is up. But if the life support system gets fully to the top, then that also will trigger the end game. So think maybe a little bit like Teotihuacan, where if the temple gets built in the center, then that ends the game. Otherwise, it's just the turn structure of the game. So On Mars is a little bit like that, where if the life support system on Mars gets fully integrated, that can end the game. But that's harder to do, and I don't know if I've played a game where that's what ended it. Now, the farther up it gets, the fewer of the game goals you need to complete to actually finish the game. And it's set up so where you can play short or long games, so you can pick goals that are considered short game, where you can play a pretty short game. I think in my opinion, it's too short to play the short game. I feel like it really needs the long game. A little bit like, Obsession. I feel like the Obsession short game is just too short. I really want a full, meaty game there. And On Mars falls into that boat, because even the long game doesn't feel too bad. If everybody knows how to play, I think this game is doable in like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. There's room for AP. On Mars does have room for that. You know, most Vital Lacerda games can have a little bit of AP proneness because of all the executive actions that could be taken, and there's a lot of room to really try to think through which one should I take and what's the best move and all that. So, you know, it could be a 3-hour game if with the, I'm going to say, the wrong crowd, with folks that are really thinking through their turns. But that could be fun. There's enough player interaction that you really have to kind of see what other people are doing and keep an eye on that to decide what you're doing. And it's not a board changing game where it's like this board's going to be completely different when it gets back to me. But if someone takes a scientist or does an upgrade that you know, maybe you have a scientist that could go on that upgrade, that can definitely impact like what do I want to do on my turn, and change that a little bit. So that is On Mars, big heavy Vital Lacerda game. So moving on to number 28. This is a small box game. Came out in 2019. To be honest, I haven't played this game a ton. I want to play it more. I think about it fairly often, and there are many times I'm like, I really want to play this game. But it's one of those that you have to have a minimum of 3 people to play. And so getting it to the table with my family tends to be a little tough because not everyone is into games in my family. And it's easier if I get it to the table with others and then we haven't played through all the missions because we haven't had anybody around for 50 missions. But that is The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9 by Thomas Singh with art by Marco Ambruster and Senate Communication Group. So I've probably played about 4 to 5 missions of this game. Very compelling, easy to sit and play through multiple scenarios. They don't take long. This is a trick-taking game. I mean, you are collaboratively working with the other players to take tricks and often take them in certain and particular orders to complete the missions that the game presents for you. I would argue that this might be the best trick-taking game that I can think of to date. I've played a few. Obviously, I mean, you know, you got your classic spades or hearts as your sort of classic trick-taking games. This, to me, is the best implementation of that mechanism of trick-taking. All right. Number 27 will match well with the fact that I am drinking coffee this morning. And this is a 2021 release by Rolf Sagel and Andre Spill with art by John Rabu and Dan Van Peridon. And that is Coffee Traders. And the first time I saw this game, I want to say it was Heavy Cardboard, I think, was playing this game. Is the first time I saw it. And they did a fantastic job of walking through that game. I noticed that the game board was beautiful. The pieces looked great, and I think that was a prototype. But most of it seems to have ported over pretty well. And it is a unique game. There are a very interesting array of mechanics for this game. I was a little nervous getting this game because it's a 3 to 5 player game. Well, yeah, it's 3. You need 3 players. There is a 2-player variant that could be implemented, but it is a variant, and it's you have to use a special. It's like a small rule book that comes with the game that allows you to do 2-player variant. I don't know of any solo variant for this game. I'm sure somebody will come up with one eventually, but it is you are basically running a modern day coffee industry to some degree. You're going to be building plantations, you will be harvesting coffee, and you will be selling coffee beans or completing goals using the coffee that you are able to harvest. What is very unique about this game is the level of interactivity with other players. You often benefit by helping other players out, either by putting a worker on their plantation, which gives you a bonus to do that, because if you put it on your own plantation, your plantation has a worker on it, but you don't get a bonus for putting it on your own plantation. You really want to build up enough coffee in collectives that there is a lot of coffee produced in various collectors, particularly the ones that you want to get the most of. But it is very challenging to you're trying to figure out, how can I get the most points? Each cooperative, which is, there's the different types of coffee come from these 5 different cooperatives, sort of 6, because you have one at the top called Sumatra, and that's a special kind of coffee, but that's not obtained like most cooperatives. That's through the civet cats in the game. And you're really trying to maximize your points. There's a little bit of area control in each cooperative, but you also want to work with others so that more coffee can be produced. You want to make sure that all the plantations have workers on them. And then when you're in the coffee harvesting phase, it all depends on what actions you took. If you didn't put a worker down to harvest coffee in a cooperative, you're probably not getting any coffee from that cooperative unless you had one of the buildings that lets you take one off the top. So it's a really interesting array of, trying to make all that work to your advantage, and you're trying to move up the Arabica tracks, and there's points from these tokens that you gather from the board depending on where you placed your plantations and such as you're building. So it's pretty fun. It's beautiful. Setup takes a while. It's kind of a little bit of a bear to set up, but I've enjoyed all the plays that I've had of this game. And one thing that's kind of interesting is it plays differently between 3, 4, and 5 players. Each of those player counts, I really have been surprised at how interestingly different each one is. I tend to think 4 might be the magic area for that game. I really need to play it at 5 again, probably a couple of times, to get a feel for, did we just not do a good job, or is it just tougher because you have so many players and there's only so much area on the board, and with 5 players everybody's everywhere, so it gets a little trickier. But I've also not played it without the starting setup rules, and my understanding is once you're experienced and you've played the game enough times, you can kind of do like a draft where you can pick your starting plantations and you decide which cooperative you want to put them in. They don't just automatically go into the 3 different cooperatives. So we'll have to try that one day and see how that works out. I have a feeling that's going to really leave us with a lot less coffee than we think we're going to make in a situation like that, but we'll see. Okay, moving right along to 26 is a 2013 release, probably borders on getting into that classic realm, and that is Viticulture by Jamie Stegmaier and Alan Stone, with art by Jock Davis, David Montgomery, and Beth Sobel. I didn't realize Beth Sobel did some of the art on this one. I enjoy this game. I like it. I still like it. I don't know that I see it leaving my collection. There's not anything that quite replaces it 100%. I think there are other worker placement games I like a little bit more, but this is a really fun game to play, and it's that being said, it's still started to trickle down my list a little bit. It used to be a little higher. I'm not sure. I think at this point I have Architects lower on the list than this one. Architects at 32. This one's at 26. So I still have this higher than Architects, but if I played both of these games more, I wonder if they don't get a little closer. It's hard to say, and maybe it's a mood thing. Maybe sometimes I just like playing Viticulture, other times I like playing Architects, but they're roughly, they're kind of in a similar ballpark. I mean, they're only 8 spots away from each other. So, maybe it's just the worker placement style, I guess, that puts it here. Viticulture is a pretty solid worker placement game. The cards are probably what make it interesting, and I do play this game. I have all the the Tuscany and all of that expansive material where you can add buildings to your tableau, and there's the area, sort of that area control with the stars area on the board. So I like playing with all that. I think it makes it a little meatier, and the base game in and of itself, I probably would not be ranked this high on my list. But with all the extra stuff and the worker types where you can get the bonus workers that have powers, that's really neat. I like that aspect of it. But yeah, Viticulture is an enjoyable game. And now, even as I'm talking about it, as I've been playing it on BGA a few times, and I kind of grown a little weary of it on BGA, but when I start thinking about like, oh yeah, that's right, if I play my physical copy, I have all these other things that I can add to the game, and I really like those. So I say Viticulture still really solid. I could see it moving down the list over time, depending on what else ends up being out there and getting more plays in. But I enjoy it at 6. If I can get 6 to the table to play this, I think it's fantastic because I love having all of those action spaces available, or even 5. I think you get to use all 3 if there's 5 players. So that's probably my favorite way to play. Make sure you get those bonus spaces in, all that good stuff. So, but yeah, there you go. That is my number 26. Number 25, another worker placement game. I kind of think, even as I look at this, I'm like, oh, a lot of worker placement stuff right here in this section. So I'm wondering if this is just the section where this is where I feel about the worker placement mechanism overall. But number 25 is a 2017 game. There have been several expansions to it, I think, at least 2, if not 3. I only have 1 in particular, although I think the game itself probably came with an expansion or 2, and then the other expansion I got had other expansions with it. So it's hard to say how many expansions there actually are. Maybe you call them modules. I think that's what they're called in the game. But that is Anachrony by David Tursi and Richard Amon. Art by Vio Farkas, Laszlo Fejas, Laszlo Fogoch, Martin Giakis, and Peter Meslenyi. I kind of go up and down on this game. The worker placement mechanisms in and of themselves in the game, I find to be pretty basic. I mean, you go to a place, you get resources. You use those resources to do things. There's nothing crazy out of the box about that. At first, the theme, like this weird dystopian future Earth falling apart with an impact coming theme, was kind of odd to me and didn't capture me at the front end. However, there is time travel. And that's probably the aspect of this game that is the most intriguing to me. And by time travel, how do you do time travel in the board game? Well, in this game, there's a point in the turn structure where you can decide to get resources from your future self. And now I want this resource. I get up to 2 different resources that you can get from your future self, and that goes, it's kind of a secret, almost like a bid, and then you're gonna open your hand and you're gonna see how much you get. Well, as you move through time and you get past there, then when you're looking back, you have to look at who has done the most of getting things from their future self. Well, they have to roll a die, and they get not anomalies. Yeah, paradoxes. They get paradoxes. So if you roll a die, you can get 1 to 2 to none paradoxes, and they go on your board. When you get enough paradoxes, it's usually 3. It depends on your faction. If you're playing asymmetric factions, then it could be more. But when you get enough paradoxes, you are going to get an anomaly on your board, which is kind of like this, like it blocks a space where you could build a building, and then you have to pay to get rid of it. Now, there are some factions that want to get anomalies in order to complete a certain goal. And there are other factions that it takes them longer to get anomalies, and it's easier to avoid getting those on the board in the first place because they require more paradoxes to build up to it. So that is an interesting aspect. And then one of the point mechanisms of the game is going back in time to return those materials to yourself. It's kind of like a loan system, but it's very interesting because as you build, you have your basic action spaces, but then you have buildings that you can build onto your own personal board, which give you more action spaces. And so you're trying to find this balance of having the right amount of workers to take the actions you want to take on the board, which you need an exosuit for, and then take the actions that you want to take on your personal board, which you don't need an exosuit for. And then some spaces will get your worker back awake, and then most spaces, when you send a worker out, they're going to come back asleep, and then you have to wake them up. And so there's another mechanism for, do I wake my workers up without giving them rest, in which case they're going to lose morale, or do I wake them up and take an extra action or pay a little extra water to do it, and that's going to they're going to have more morale, and I can get more morale points that way. There's some in-game scoring points. Points come from quite a few places in this game. But the time travel aspect is what really I find fascinating, and trying to find that balance of building essentially time travel machines to go back into the past. And if you wait too long, or you don't build a powerful enough machine, you can only go back so far, and then you'll end up with stuff on the board in the past, and that will come back to haunt you later in the game if you can't get rid of it. So that is Anachrony. Fairly, it's not as heavy as it probably sounds. It's actually pretty easy to teach. It takes a long time to set up. So it's one of those games where I sometimes am not 100% feeling like the setup is worth the overall gameplay. Although it's a good game and I enjoy it. I mean, it's number 25 on my list, so it's not like it's way, down and, not even on the 100 list. But sometimes I have better experiences than other, I guess. I do like it with expansions. I've never played with the Doomsday expansion. That's one I haven't used, but I do like the tiles, the timeline tiles, where when you're putting your stuff you're getting from the future, depending on how people bid, sometimes you can get extra, sometimes you might have to take a paradox if you end up in the wrong space. I like that aspect of the game. I like to play with the adventures. I think those are pretty fun and add a little bit of meat to the game. And then I think I like the where you get the extra exosuits that you can play with. I like those too. So there's a lot to like about the game. I haven't played with the most recent expansion that came out. I can't remember what it's called. I've had some people say that they liked it and they thought it was good. It's not one of those games where I'm like, I got to go have every expansion. I have the Exosuit Commander expansion. That is the only one which you can kind of see up there in the background in the corner. And that one was really good. This game benefits from having the exosuits. I haven't painted my exosuits. One day I hope to paint them, but I want to get better at painting before I do that because I don't want to ruin them. And I'm not that great at painting just yet. So honestly, I'm not putting a lot of practice into it. So anyway, that is Anachrony at number 25. Number 24 is a 2020 release. Very, very popular game. That is by Min and Elwin, and that is The Lost Ruins of Arnak. And this is art by Andre Hirdina, Jacob Polzer, František Sedlik, and Milan Vavran. This is a worker placement, deck building sort of game. Maybe some set collection in there. It's very vibrant art with great components, a lot of nifty interlocking mechanisms. It's pretty easy to teach, and there's enough depth in the gameplay and variability in cards that it kind of continues to be compelling. Between the artifacts and the items that are at the top of the board that you can collect, I mean, every game is a little bit different. There's a little bit of a luck element in, you know, what can come out, what's available to you. I've played a few games where I got stuck, where it's like, oh, well, I got, you know, 2 coins or 3. I might have 3 coins, but like all the cards on the board are 4 coin cards, and it's like, well, I can't do anything. So I've not played. I think there are some set strategies that tend to work better. And I have been recently experimenting with trying some different things as I've played the game, and it seems to be that I'll probably need to gravitate back toward those sort of, I got to do this and focus on that first, and then I can kind of see where it goes from there. So maybe with experienced players, there's sort of maybe a more of a path toward victory. This is a game that I have in my collection. I enjoy playing it. I think it's easier to get people engaged because it's so colorful and bright, and teaching how to play is not that hard. So it's a good one, good enjoyable one to get to the table, that if people are like, hey, let's play Lost Ruins of Arnak again, I'm always good for it. But I'd probably see this one down the road, maybe moving down my list, because I feel like there are probably better ways for these mechanisms to be implemented. Moving right along to number 23 is Underwater Cities by Vladimir Suki and art by Ildrim and Milan Vavron. Milan Vavron showing up 2 games in a row. Interesting. I started playing Underwater Cities on Yukata, which is like kind of a European board game arena, I guess you could say. Which is, it's got a lot of cool games on there. If you've not used Yukata before, I would recommend checking it out. I probably played like 20 or 30 games of Underwater Cities on there, just learning the game. But that is, while I don't own this game, I constantly enjoyed going back and playing it. They have a solo option that you can play, and I played that multiple times. I got to play this one with Paul Grogan, and it's a fun, solid game, and the card system is what just kind of kept me coming back, where even though it's a little bit random and you can't always, like, I mean, you could just not get good cards, and that's not, you know, there's not much you could do about that, but you could always do something, and it was just always fascinating to see how far I could build out my city, and utilize these things to the best of my ability to make it work. And it's a little bit of multiplayer solitaire, I guess, because you're building your city, and what other players, I can't remember how much what other players do really impacted what you were doing. You're really just playing at the same time on your separate boards, trying to see who can score the most points. But it's very enjoyable. I would like to play a physical copy sometime and just see what I think of that in person. It's on my wish list, but it's kind of lower down because I'm not sure how much do I want a physical copy. It's not one of those games where I'm not sure how much it would hit the table, or if I'd be more inclined to just to play it online and interact with it that way. But I would love to play it sometime if somebody brings it to a game night. So that is my number 23. Moving on to number 22 is a game that really surprised me. I did not expect much of this game. It was sent to me by a friend, and I have great respect for that friend, so I don't want to make it sound like I expect it to be a terrible game coming from this individual. I think at the time I received this, I was not playing two-player only games that much. I played a couple, but nothing, not a lot. And I tended to avoid them because I wanted to have games that more people could be involved in. But I have since gotten into more two-player games and enjoyed them. This one came out in 2019 by John Perry with art by Valerio Buonfantino and Stephen Gibson. Probably Stephen Gibson, not Stephen. And that's Air, Land, and Sea. If you have not played Air, Land, and Sea, I highly recommend giving it a shot. As a two-player game, this is a lot of fun, and one of the aspects I love about this game is that the more you play it, and the better all players get to know all the cards that are in the game, the more it becomes a little bit more of a chess match. Like, well, they could have this, you don't know. And it's not, every card is not in every game. There's like 3 or 4 cards that are not included in every game, and you don't know which ones they are. So you have no idea what your opponent for sure has. You know what you have, and you know what they could have, and that's it. So it is very fascinating managing because you have an air, a land, and a sea theater of war, and they're going to play cards on their side, and that's going to interact with cards on your side, either making them flip over to where their abilities don't count anymore. Different ones have different point values. Weaker point values tend to have more useful abilities, and higher point values will tend to have no abilities. But there's just a lot of different functional interaction between those cards and across those theaters of war. And one of the very unique aspects of the game, I thought this was an extremely creative piece to put in the game, because you're ultimately trying to see who can get to, I think it's 12 points the fastest. Well, if you win a game outright, you go all the rounds and you get to the end and you win, you're going to get 6. So you win 2 in a row, you've won the game. Or you just win 2. So you could just play 3 games and somebody's won if you've gotten to the end of every game. But there is this mechanic in the game where if I look at my cards, and this probably comes into play more when you know all the cards and what's coming, but I'm like, I don't feel like I can win this game. I don't see a good combination for my cards to pull out a win here. You can withdraw. So I may play 1 card, maybe I get 2 cards in, but depending on when I withdraw, now my opponent will win that round if I withdraw, but the sooner I withdraw, the less they win. So they might win if I withdraw on the first 2 plays, maybe they only get 1 coin for my withdrawal, maybe 3 if it's a little bit further in. You get too far in, now they're going to still get 4, but even withdrawing then could be better and gives you at least an opportunity to let me try to come back and win a game outright and make that score a lot closer than going the full round knowing I'm probably going to lose. So, and there's a lot of tension. There have been several games where I came down to the last card and I'm like, I think I got this, and then they play something that just, it flipped it over. They had the one card that I was kind of counting on them not having. So there's a lot of cat and mouse in this game. But Air, Land, and Sea, extremely fantastic 2-player game. Probably could see that going up the list because it's a lot of fun to play. It's one of our family favorites. But yeah, there you go. That is my number 21. Oh, that's my number 22. My number 21 is another worker placement game. Yet another one in this this section of 10. This one is by Uwe Rosenberg with art by Dennis Lohausen, and yes, this is where A Feast for Odin landed. I am still trying to decide what I fully feel about this game. It is a fascinating game. I don't know if there's another game with so many worker placement spaces on it. I am not terribly good at it, and I really want to get the Norwegian's expansion because I have heard that it expands a lot of the strategy that you can utilize in the game, makes some of the strategies that are really not going to be competitively options in the original, it makes them much more competitive and legitimate strategical options in this game. So I look forward to trying that one day and seeing what I think of it. But A Feast for Odin, even with just the base game, is a lot of fun. Props to adding those tray inserts into the game. I did not know every time I looked at this game that it actually came with those. I think I'd seen playthroughs and I'd seen them, but I just assumed that that was like something people added later. So I was shocked when I got a copy of this game that it had those inserts. One of the better, like, we know that there's all these, pieces, and giving you a place to put them is great. So I think it's Ark Nova kind of followed in the same suit, had a nice tray for their pieces. And I think Feast for Odin is, to my knowledge, one of the first games to do something like that. This one came out in 2016. But it is a fun game, even if I don't think I've played with anybody that's like super competitive and like knows the very best strategies. And I think I've read that there are certain strategies that are like just what you got to do if you're going to win in a competitive environment. I don't know that that's fun to do it that way if there's kind of a linear strategy toward victory 90% of the time. But it's fun to play. It's on Board Game Arena, so I've gotten to play it there several times. I've gotten to play it in person a few times, and it's a pretty solid, enjoyable worker placement game. It makes my number 21. I'm not sure how many other worker placement games are above this one. There might be a few here, but not a ton of them. This is higher on my list than most. And I like the diversity of it. Like, you can do so many different things. I like that the card, one of the things I'm playing with now, as I'm playing a few games on BGA, is I'm wrestling with that card system. Like, there are so many cards in this game. It's almost unbelievable how many cards are in the game, which I think are called occupations, maybe, like Agricola. But there's just so many. And for a worker placement game where the vast majority of the game is placing workers on these spots, there's like 64 of them, 63, something like that. And you're placing workers on the spots, and you're either placing 1, 2, 3, or 4 workers, depending on the row you're in or the column you're in. So column 1 is 1 worker, column 2 is 2, so forth and so on, up to column 4. Column 3, you'll get to draw a card. Column 4, you can play a card, and then there's a couple action spaces where you can just pay some resources to play a card. There's one action space, I want to say it's the 2 action space for the card play, where you can play up to 4 cards. And I am working on, like, is there a way to leverage these cards pretty well? There's a lot of luck in what you could draw because there's so many cards, but I have a hard time thinking that Uwe Rosenberg created this game with all these cards and there's not some pretty interesting, meaty secrets in there. And I could be wrong, and maybe somebody who's explored this in greater depth can comment and say, yeah, I've looked at all these cards. They're just, you can win most games without having to mess with the cards. I've never seen anybody win a game with leveraging those cards very well. But I know in Agricola, the cards can make a huge difference, maybe the difference. A Feast for Odin, the worker placement action spaces seem to be much more meaty and significant than that of Agricola. But at the same time, it's a fun game. I feel like there's a lot to explore here, and that's one of the things I love about certain games, is there's just a lot of room to explore different options, and you can play 50 games and play 50 different ways and come up with 50 different outcomes, and you learn something new each outcome. So yeah, Feast for Odin, number 21. And that brings to a conclusion the third to last section. So next time we'll be doing 20 to 11, and then I will finally arrive at my top 10. But thank you for joining me. And as always, if you have comments or suggestions or thoughts about any of the games I put on here, please post them. Let me know. Love to hear what folks think. And until next time, have a great day.